3 people are shot dead in Lincolnshire. Police say the attack outside a swimming pool isn't terror-related. 2 people and the gunman are dead. Also ahead.
That your word is your bond.
That your word is your bond.
Melania Trump accused of copying Michelle Obama word for word on day 1 of the Republican convention. Vauxhall Sophia car fires. Bosses admit to MPs they should have told customers earlier. And from Britain's beaches to motorways to the steps of number 10, we're all basking in the sunshine.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Charlene White.
Good afternoon. 3 people, including the suspected gunman, have been shot dead outside a public swimming pool in Lincolnshire. Police say there's no reason to believe it's terror-related and no shots were fired by them. This lunchtime, investigations are ongoing to identify the victims and the cause of the shooting. Officers were called just after 9 o'clock this morning after reports of a firearms incident at the Castle swimming pool in the centre of Spalding. Emma Walden has the latest.
Surrounded by emergency vehicles, a white forensic tent and medical equipment are clearly visible at the spot where 3 people died this morning. Emergency services were called to the Castle Sports Complex in Spalding at 9 a.m. after reports of a shooting. Paramedics and air ambulance crews were warned to approach the scene with caution. Upon arrival, they treated 3 people suffering from gunshot wounds. But despite their best efforts, all were pronounced dead at the scene. Local newspaper reporter Nigel Chapman spoke to one eyewitness and described the immediate aftermath.
We first heard from a caller saying that a sound like a bird scarer had gone off, and she actually, even at that stage, suspected it was a gunshot. And she'd thought she'd seen somebody lying in the swimming pool car park too. When we got down there were police cars, the air ambulance on the Castle field, and ambulances. Very many of them. It's clearly a major incident.
Local schools were put on lockdown as a precautionary measure, and although that has now been lifted, the area remains cordoned off. Lincolnshire Police have issued a statement saying there is an ongoing police investigation, and at this stage we are not looking for anyone else in connection with the incident. There is no indication that this is a terrorist-related incident, and no shots have been fired by police. There are unconfirmed reports that those dead are 2 women and a man in an incident that has shocked this small market town. Emma Walden, ITV News.
Our correspondent Rupert Evelyn is in Spalding for us this afternoon. Rupert, what's happening there right now?
Well, there's obviously an enormous police investigation to establish exactly what has gone on here today and perhaps even the reasons behind it. It was a very, very nervous time here at 9 o'clock this morning. The emergency services who took the call at 4 minutes past 9 had been told to approach with caution as they headed towards the scene. And this is a leisure centre. Half an hour later, it would have been full of children. There's also a creche based here. There was a children's school swimming session that was due to happen at 9:30. So obviously from the emergency services point of view, it was a very tricky time and a very nervous time indeed. They'll be looking at what happened behind the scenes, what led to these deaths. They'll be trying to establish whether the gun is legally held, whether it is an illegal weapon. There are all sorts of questions to try and establish how, why, in Spalding at 9 o'clock this morning, 3 people have died.
Rupert, thank you very much. A decision's being made this lunchtime on whether to ban all Russian athletes from next month's Olympic Games in Rio. An independent inquiry which was published yesterday exposed a huge state-sponsored doping programme across dozens of different sports. Well, our sports correspondent Ian Payne is at the IOC headquarters in Lausanne in Switzerland. How likely do you think it is, Ian, that we'll see all those athletes banned from Rio?
I'm not sure we'll see that decision taken today, although that's still very, very much on the cards. The International Olympic Committee's Executive Board have been meeting with a telephone conference call from members all over the world. None of them has appeared yet, and we're still waiting for a statement as to what they're going to do today. It's slightly complicated because the Russians are challenging one of the earlier bans in a court. Now, as we heard yesterday, all of this happened because of a WADA report, the World Anti-Doping Agency, into what happened at the Sochi Winter Olympics in Russia in 2014, when we heard tales of cheating that had never been heard before on a scale that no one had ever experienced, and it's left everyone reeling.
It's very, very difficult to determine really who's the clean athlete from this, and I've no doubt there are clean athletes and there will be collateral damage, but the overall damage that this is doing to the sports system is that clean athletes must be asking themselves why they are bothering to remain clean when athletes who have cheated by doping have been getting away with it for so many years.
So here's the timetable. We wait for a statement from the International Olympic Committee. On the other side of town, in Lausanne, ironically, the Russians are challenging the original ban for their track and field athletes in the Court of Arbitration for Sport. That's supposed to last until Thursday, and maybe then, finally, we'll have a decision. So we're expecting some sort of maybe provisional suspension for all the Russian athletes when the IOC release their statement, and then they may make that permanent depending what happens on the other side of this city.
OK, Ian, thanks very much. Vauxhall bosses have admitted to MPs that the company had not been as relentless as it should have been in inspecting cars that burst into flames. Thousands of Zafira B models have been recalled after some caught fire. Today, MPs from the Transport Select Committee expressed disbelief that the company didn't take action sooner. Our consumer editor Chris Troy reports.
Within minutes, this is how an everyday family trip to a drive-in takeaway turned into mayhem as their Vauxhall Zafira B burst into flames. The model is the subject of a massive recall affecting almost 235,000 cars. Vauxhall says there have been 300 fires.
Smoke turned to sort of melted plastic dropping into the passenger footwell, and subsequently set light to the car.
Vauxhall has been down in the Commons today talking. What would you like MPs to do now?
The big thing is for these cars to be made safe, whether that's, remove them from the road until this recall can be done. I sort of fear that one day I'll be looking at the news and somebody perhaps wasn't so lucky, which nobody wants. So I really think Vauxhall, and it's on the MPs to act.
Today, Vauxhall told MPs on the Transport Select Committee that the first fire was in 2009, but action wasn't taken until 2014.
But you knew there was a fire in that model. You knew that was the case. So why didn't you react to that?
Certainly from...
No reason.
Well, no, certainly from my understanding, until we had really understood what the nature of that fire was.
Families like this one that have been caught up in fires say action should have been taken sooner. Vauxhall today admitted it hadn't been as relentless as it perhaps should have been in investigating all fires, and it issued a new apology.
Customers either ones who've experienced a fire which is enormously traumatic and worrying for them and their family, for customers who've had the inconvenience, and we and Vauxhall and I personally am truly sorry of that.
Today, Vauxhall said this will cost it an estimated £33.5 million, but the cost to its reputation may be its greater concern.
Well, Chris is in our Westminster studio. You can see Vauxhall was definitely under pressure there from the MPs, but what was the MPs' reaction to their evidence?
Well, there was some colourful language used. Some talked about how deeply distressing this whole thing has been. Others said they were gobsmacked. And Vauxhall said that they thought it would have been ideal if drivers had been alerted more quickly to this problem. But they say they simply didn't have enough evidence to piece together what was the underlying cause of the fires that you've seen so dramatically shown in those pictures. I think what will come from today's hearing is something that will go far beyond just Vauxhall, because it's emerged that the industry as a whole doesn't collect much data on car fires. MPs are likely to order the motor trade to do much more of that in future.
Chris, thank you. And for everything you need to know about Vauxhall's fire safety issue, or to find out if you're affected, do go to itv.com/news. Police in Germany are trying to establish whether a 17-year-old who injured 4 people with a knife and an axe on a train last night was inspired by the so-called Islamic State. The teenager was an Afghan refugee and the group has claimed responsibility for the attack. Our security editor Rohit Katru is in Würzburg this lunchtime and has sent us the latest from the scene.
Well, this is a spot just a little further along the train tracks where the first terror attack in Germany to be claimed by IS happened last night. A 17-year-old boy using an axe and a knife to attack passengers. He was killed just here by an elite unit from the local police who just happened to be in the area. Now this morning IS put out a statement through its semi-official news agency saying it was responsible. We should take that seriously, but what's clear from the language that they use is that this wasn't directed centrally, but the police say today that they have discovered an IS flag in the home where this 17-year-old boy, an Afghan refugee, was staying. And one of the questions here now is whether this moment will in any way be something of a turning point for the mood of Germans towards refugees. They have taken in around 1 million in the last 18 months or so.
Rohit Katru in Germany for us. Well, still to come this lunchtime. The US Secretary of State arrives in Downing Street to a bit of a bumpy start. Plus,
I'm on a busy Blackpool beach as temperatures here hit 30 degrees.
But first, there was much excitement surrounding the first speech of Donald Trump's wife at the Republican convention last night. But Mrs. Trump left her husband's team red-faced when she appeared to copy parts of Michelle Obama's speech. Melania Trump spoke of her family values and passing those on to the next generation. But the issue is that Mrs. Obama said almost exactly the same thing 8 years ago. The Trump camp denies any copying. Our Washington correspondent Robert Moore reports from Cleveland.
He is nothing if not a showman, and this was quite an entrance. Donald Trump was making his first appearance at the Republican convention with a simple task: to introduce his wife to America.
It is my great honor to present the next First Lady of the United States.
Melania is a former fashion model from Slovenia, and she took on the task of portraying her husband in more inclusive and gentler terms.
Donald intends to represent all the people, not just some of the people. That includes Christians and Jews and Muslims. It includes Hispanics and African Americans and Asians and the poor and the middle class.
At first it went down well. Then came the devastating realization that a key part was plagiarized, copied from a Michelle Obama 2008 speech.
My parents impressed on me the values that you work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond.
You work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond.
We need to pass those lessons on to the many generations to follow.
Pass them on to the next generation.
Because we want our children in this nation to know.
We want our children and all children in this nation to know
that the only limit to your achievements is the strength of your dreams and your willingness to work for them.
That the only limit to the height of your achievements is the reach of your dreams and your willingness to work hard for them.
The row also disguised an astonishing split inside the party. At times yesterday there was chaos on the convention floor. Anti-Trump forces making their last stand.
You are ignoring delegates who have been elected to this convention. election.
The takeover of the party by Donald Trump is now complete. Melania Trump may be trying to soften his image, but what we've witnessed here is a ruthless operation to crush dissent. The venom is shocking. Some delegates say they face multiple death threats. Even their families have been intimidated by Trump supporters.
As one delegate told me, it was going to cost my family too much because her kids were being threatened. Well, my kids have been threatened. We've never seen this in presidential politics, ever, and it comes from the heart of the candidate. Because he could have stopped and he chose not to, and he incites it.
Did I mishear you? You said 1,000 death threats.
Oh yeah, easily.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
But even with this plagiarism row, Trump is in full control, dictating this party's agenda, and now one election campaign away from the White House. Robert Moore, ITV News, Cleveland.
Well, the US Secretary of State, John Kerry, has arrived in Downing Street to meet Theresa May. Earlier, the new Prime Minister addressed her cabinet for the first time, telling the meeting that she wanted Britain to prosper outside of the European Union. She told her ministers it was their duty to make Brexit a success.
We have the challenge of Brexit, and Brexit does mean Brexit, and we're going to make a success of it, and we will do that by forging a new role for the United Kingdom in the world. But we won't be a government that's defined just by Brexit. We will also be a government defined by the social reform that we undertake.
Well, Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp is at Downing Street for us this lunchtime, and Theresa May has been talking about Brexit means Brexit. So typically a hot topic for her then this afternoon.
Yeah, a hot topic and a very important one. But as you just heard her say there, she doesn't want this government to be defined by the issue of exiting the European Union alone. And in what was a 90-minute cabinet meeting in there today, her first, of course, it's a little longer than they normally are. We are told that she will herself personally chair 3 new cabinet committees, one covering the economy, one covering that issue of Brexit, and one covering social reform. And we were told by Downing Street that we should look to those to give us some idea of what sort of government Theresa May will lead. There's one thing she also said at the top of the meeting, which is that politics is not a game. In fact, there was something that she said at her speech when she launched her bid to be party leader. At the time, we all thought that was a criticism of Boris Johnson, because at the time he was running against her for Tory party leader. He allowed only a wry smile to come on his face, because he's obviously now sat next to Theresa May as her foreign secretary.
Well, as I mentioned, the US Secretary of State is over. What are his plans for his trip?
Well, plans do include a meeting with his counterpart here, which is Boris Johnson. But if you take a look at these pictures, it wasn't the easiest arrival for John Kerry as he came through that famous black door this morning. And I suspect, if nothing else, he'll be hoping his press conference with Boris Johnson is a little smoother than his arrival here.
Chris Shipp, thanks very much. The cost of living has gone up, with the inflation rate for June rising to a higher than expected 0.5%. But Brexit's not to blame. The figures were taken before the EU referendum. It's believed the rise is due to higher consumer spending, airfares and fuel. 2 pilots have been arrested at Glasgow Airport on suspicion of being drunk as they prepared to fly 250 passengers from Scotland to Canada. Staff are understood to have raised concerns because of the way the 2 pilots were behaving before takeoff. They're employed by a Canadian airline. And Pippa Middleton has announced her engagement. Kate's sister will marry James Matthews, a hedge fund manager. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are said to be absolutely delighted. And finally, Britain's been enjoying a spot of sunshine today on what's set to be the hottest day of the year. Unsurprisingly, beaches are packed as temperatures soar to up to 35 degrees. Here's Sally Biddulph.
Blackpool this morning as people hit the seafront to make the most of the sunshine, cooling off with a splash and a paddle. The UK is in the grip of a mini heatwave, which could prove record-breaking.
Well, temperatures are already in excess of 30 degrees. We could well see them peak at 34 or 35 degrees today, our hottest weather for well over a year, and the heat, the length and breadth of the country, increasingly close and muggy. Those temperatures not sliding too far at all after dark, so another uncomfortable night's sleep. In fact, it could well be a record-breaking warm July night.
And if we're hot, spare a thought for the animals. Larry the Downing Street cat was spied stretching out in a shady corner in front of number 10 to keep cool. While the gorillas at London Zoo got to grips with giant ice lollies to control their temperatures as their enclosure basked in the sunshine. But it was the quintessential summer treat of strawberries and cream drawing the crowds at the sun-baked Royal Welsh Show in Llanelwedd. Up and down the country, people are enjoying the weather. This the scene in Princes Street Gardens in Edinburgh this lunchtime. And others are going to great lengths to sunbathe. A traffic jam on the M3 wasn't going to stop this woman. Yes, really. Thankfully, most of us are much more sensible and are enjoying the sun safely. Sally Biddulph, ITV News.
Well, Duncan Golestani is in Blackpool for us this lunchtime. I can't lie, Duncan, I'm quite jealous. I'm sure the crowds are enjoying the weather while they can.
Yeah, you'd be jealous, Charlie. It's not quite as warm up here as it is down south, but still, these things are relative. It is hitting around 30 degrees here in Blackpool, so people really are making the most of it on the beach. Lots and lots of holiday makers, and in the last few minutes, a primary school on what looks like a hastily arranged field trip, because of course parts of the UK are enjoying temperatures much warmer than more exotic places like Lanzarote, Los Angeles and Barcelona. The businesses along here on the front would be rubbing their hands with glee if they weren't so busy taking people's money for ice cream and cold drinks, because of course it hasn't been the most reliable summer up until now. Unfortunately, as my weather colleagues are keen to say, it is not set to last. Rain and storms coming in through the night, but that's a while away. For now, just enjoy it and put on cream.
And your sunglasses, Duncan, that you're holding there. Thank you very much. Well, there's a full forecast for you for whatever you're doing this afternoon. The news where you are comes after this, but from all of us in the Lunchtime team, enjoy your afternoon. Goodbye.